Over the course of Clarke's Latin 1 and 2, we have encountered nouns in both of the first two Latin noun categories, or declensions. The first declension and the second declension, which itself subdivides into four further categories, as we can see here. We've also established that nouns have three basic grammatical properties. They have a number, whether they are singular or plural. That's the one grammatical property that verbs also have, number. They have a gender, masculine, feminine, neuter, or common. And, perhaps most importantly, they have a case, nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, or ablative, shortened here for the sake of squeezing them into this table. The case of a noun tells us the noun's function, its job in the sentence. Is it the subject, the person or thing carrying out the action of the verb? In which case it'll be in the nominative case. The object, having the action done to it, in the accusative case. The vocative is for addressing. The genitive, of, either possessive, the book of the boy, or partitive, some of the children, a crowd of angry women, or whatever. The dative case means to in the sense of an indirect object. I am giving money to the Queen. And it can mean for, either with advantage, I am preparing a delicious meal for my friend, or disadvantage, I am preparing a violent death for the senators, disadvantage. And finally, the ablative by or with, in the sense of the ablative of instrument, carrying something out with some sort of implement, an inanimate object. Now, in each noun declension, we can tell what case the noun is in according to its ending. So let's begin by having a look at the first declension. The first declension, as I've already mentioned, is nice and straightforward because it only has one noun type. Mensa, Latin for a table, whose endings are as follows. Mensa, mensa, mensam, mensai, mensai, mensar. Note that the ablative singular is pronounced slightly differently from those short A's. It has an R sound. Occasionally it has an accent written across it, a long line called a macron. Then in the plural, mensai, mensai, mensas, mensarum, mensis, and mensis. The vast majority of first declension nouns are feminine. The only exceptions are a few common nouns, like incola and native, which could be male or female, and certain words that are masculine because they were considered male roles in the ancient world. Nauta, a sailor, agricola, a farmer, and poeta, a poet. Now, the second declension is a little more pesky because it splits up into these four different subdivisions. By far and away the most common are us-type nouns, which follow the same pattern as dominus, a master, and that's the master of a house specifically, as opposed to magister, which is a schoolmaster. The endings of dominus are as follows: dominus, domine, dominum, domini, domino, domino, domini, domini, dominos, dominorum, dominis, and dominis. And although it may seem a nuisance having yet another set of endings to learn, we can see quite a few striking similarities between the dominus endings and the mensa endings. Note how am has become The ae endings mostly turn into the letter I, while ars becomes os, arum becomes aurum, and the is endings for the dative and ablative plural are retained. Now, a small number of second declension nouns in Latin end in and you can see that to begin with, they don't have any endings. Note the absence of this dash. The nominative singular and vocative singular of magister are just magister and magister, likewise pua and pua. But from the accusative singular onwards, magister and pua have the same endings as dominus that we've just been looking at. Magister, magister, and then magistrum, magistri, magistro, magistro, magistri, magistri, magistros, magistrorum, magistris, magistris. And exactly the same thing for puer. Puer, puer, puerum, pueri, puero, puero, pueri, pueri, pueros, puerorum, pueris, and pueris. Now you might be wondering to yourselves, well, why is it that we have to have two different categories for type nouns, given that the endings are exactly the same in both of them? Well, examine the stem of magister. We begin with the two simple magister forms, and then this E disappears, and the stem becomes magister. This is called a contraction. Magister-type nouns have contracted stems. They lose the E, and from the accusative singular onwards have this special stem with those familiar dominus endings. Whereas puer, a boy, doesn't contract. He doesn't lose the E, he remains puer, puer, puerum, pueri, puero, puero. As I say, there are really very few type nouns in Latin, and the vast majority of them operate like magister with the contracted stem. But puer, a boy, doesn't. There's also liberi, children, which are always plural, liberi, liberi, liberos, etc. And there's the slightly irregular noun vir, V-I-R. Even though it ends in IR, it still behaves like an ER noun. Vir, vir, virum, viri, viro, viro. But most type nouns follow the magister pattern. Finally, bellum. All type nouns are neuter. I should have mentioned, incidentally, that all type nouns are masculine, and the vast majority of type second declension nouns are masculine as well. But all of the bellum type nouns are neuter. Now, they have a different ending of their own in the nominative, bellum. And that ending is then repeated in the vocative and the accusative, bellum, bellum, bellum. And in the nominative plural, it goes bel-a, and again, that nominative form is repeated in the vocative and the accusative, a. While the rest of the endings are exactly the same as the rest of the second declension ones. So bellum, 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 belli, bello, bello, bella, 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 bellorum, bellis, bellis. It's perhaps the easiest one to remember because it's possible to say it very quickly. Blum, 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 bli, blo, blo, blah, 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 blis, blis. All of these forms, it goes without saying, must be committed to memory at the earliest opportunity. It is of paramount importance because whenever we're dealing with a Latin sentence, you need to be able to look at every noun in it and establish what case the noun is in, and whether it's singular or plural. Only by doing that can we find out where the subject is, where the object is, what function all these words are serving in the sentence. Because remember, Latin word order is peculiar. We tend to have the subject at the beginning, the verb at the end, the object in the middle, datives and ablatives usually towards the verb, but not always. And the genitive case mostly comes after the noun to which it corresponds. Adverbs can come at the beginning if they're to do with time, or usually just before the verb if they are not. And prepositional phrases are located nearest whichever bit of the sentence they're most relevant to. But it's because of this unusual, unfamiliar word order that we've got to know our endings and be able to analyse any noun we come across. Now, for the most part, it's pretty obvious which category a noun falls into because of its ending. Thus far, anything that ends in A, Regina a queen, Ancilla slave girl, Puella girl, Nauta sailor, it ends in A, it will operate like a Mensa type noun. Likewise, if something ends in us in its nominative singular, servus a slave, equus a horse, ventus the wind, it'll behave like dominus. And again, if something ends in like templum, a temple, or aurum, gold, it'll operate like bellum. But we do come to something of a complication when it comes to the type nouns. If I were to tell you, for example, that Soccer, nothing to do with football, soccer, S-O-C-E-R, is Latin for a father-in-law, you couldn't tell me, just with that information, whether it goes like magister or puer. It is primarily for this reason that nouns are given in dictionaries and in vocabulary lists with fuller forms. Here are some examples. All nouns in dictionaries have the nominative singular, the genitive singular, and the gender provided in brackets. Now, the ending of the genitive singular is helpful because it tells us, if it's an AE ending, that it's a first declension noun, and if it's an I ending, it's a second declension noun. But also very useful is that the genitive singular gives us the stem. If we remove the genitive ending, we get the various stems: anquil, equa, liber. And in the case of these ER-type nouns, the fact that liber contracts, goes from liber to libri, means that it must therefore operate like magister. Whereas soccer, a father-in-law, which I mentioned before, is soccer, socceri, uncontracted, so it behaves like puer does. Now, these are all nouns, people, places and things. But Latin adjectives, describing words, words that qualify nouns, are lovely and easy because they have all the same endings as the nouns do. Let's take an example. Look down the bottom here at the word altus. It gives us the English word altitude, means high or deep, depending which direction you're going in. Altus, alta, altum, where those three forms are masculine, feminine, and neuter. The vast majority of simple Latin adjectives are the us types. Altus, the masculine, goes like dominus does. Alta, the feminine, goes like mensa. And altum, the neuter, goes like bellum. Simple. A few adjectives end in and again, we can see whether they have contracted or uncontracted stems. Pulcher, meaning beautiful or handsome, depending which gender you're talking about, goes pulcher, pulcra, pulcrum. It has a contracted stem. So pulcher, the masculine, will go like magister, and once again, the feminine, pulcra, goes like mensa, while the neuter, pulcrum, goes like bellum. Very straightforward. Adjectives are located, as a rule, after the noun that they qualify, unless the adjective is to do with size or quantity. Note also that an adjective can be used by itself as a noun, and we translate it according to gender. So multi agricolae would be many farmers. Multi by itself is masculine. Many masculine people, so many men. Likewise multi, many women, multa, many things. And this comes up quite often in Latin sentences.